Hi, Misha here, and last time we talked about the space jockeys, the engineers, Prometheus, and the original alien. Now we're going to talk about the USCSS Prometheus ship itself, its capabilities, its mission a little bit, and a little bit about its crew. We have the Eaglemoss die-cast Prometheus ship, and we have 3 figures from NECA. From Wave 2, we have David 8 to be proper. And from Wave 4, or the Lost Wave, we have Vickers and Shaw. Very much on the same body, but different accessories, different heads. And ended up picking up Vickers just because she was relatively cheap. As Captain Idris Elba found out, apparently. Harmonicas. Anyway, let's talk about the ship itself, kind of how it relates to real life, all that good fun stuff. And as always, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. With that, let's dive in. Well, beginning at the beginning, we'll put the USCSS Prometheus on the spinny thing. That's United States Commercial Starship or Spaceship. And this is Hyliades class, the second member. The original USCSS Hyliades was really the first successful FTL capable ship. It was a science ship, an exploration ship. Really, though, it was a test bed. It dated back to around the year 2072. The USCSS Prometheus was more advanced in many of its systems. Its FTL, its hypersleep, its AI. And again, it was primarily an exploration craft, a science craft. Really just an experimental test bed, again, for new technologies. It was not armed, and its only real armament, as far as, defensive, I should say, is really just for interstellar flight. It did have a multi-layer, semi-rigid, kind of somewhat self-repairing hull, but that wasn't for combat. It was just interstellar flight. And it was a pretty large craft, about 130 meters long, just under 50 meters wide, and roughly 36 meters tall, depending on exactly where the thrust vectoring engines were located. It had a total of 6 decks, although only 4 of them were really habitable. 2 decks were kind of through decks for equipment and what have you. We'll do a deck breakdown. And it had a crew of up to 25, although it only required about 3 to operate. And in the film, it had a crew of 17 or 18 in actuality. So, not fully crewed, but that makes sense. The space shuttle, when it used to fly, rarely had 7 astronauts on board. And this was really its first deep space voyage. So, it was powered by nuclear fission. And, I think I said fission. Sorry, I mean fusion. Nuclear fusion. They used industrial diamond, combining it with a plasma stream for an energy reaction. And this would power the ship's systems. For the sublight engines, which were essentially advanced rockets, it would shunt directly from the fusion plant. For the FTL capability, it had a tachyon shunt, a displacement drive, if you will, and so it would need more conversion from power source for that. And it was capable of achieving about 16.4 light years. So, yeah, about 16.5 times the speed of light. Not near as fast as later ships like the US Sulaco, which was capable of almost 0.75 light years per day. So yeah, but then again, this is taking place at the end of the 21st century, so cut us some slack. And it definitely is an interesting mission. I do like the sense of exploration that it involves. It takes off from Earth. The mission starts to be planned in the year 2089. The Prometheus leaves Earth. Again, the Prometheus had already been constructed. It was undergoing testing. It leaves Earth in the year 2091 and arrives at its target of LV-223 on Christmas Day 2093. So about 2.5 years after it first left Earth. And in the film, our mission essentially takes place over roughly a week, going to about New Year's Day 2094. Pretty neat ship. Let's take it off the stand. Eaglemoss did a good job with this. I picked it up a couple of years back when it was on sale. I don't think they ever did an XL version. It's die-cast, the main body's metal, the engines are polymer. They're on these rotating pylons. Of course, in this configuration, it's for interstellar flight and sublight flight. They can propel it into an atmosphere. It's intended to land on a planet, and when it does, these struts will rotate and the engines become vertical takeoff and landing, and they actually even have landing struts in the pylons themselves here. It's a pretty good sized ship for what it is. We have several comms antenna, several points of interest here and there. We have 4 main decks. A deck kind of has the critical equipment. B deck has the command equipment, the living areas. And then C deck is the primary cargo reactor deck. And then D deck is the vehicle bay slash garage, as it was called, the part that kind of drops down for the crew. Neat ship. So let's go more into detail. Now let's put one of the NECA figures on the stand to give you something else to look at while we talk about it. And we'll begin with nominally the mission's leader, sort of, and the nominal leader of Wayland Corp, Meredith Vickers. Also the one who boned the captain of the ship itself, so there we go. We'll talk about the suits in a minute, but I wanted to talk about the crew accommodations, because I really found that kind of stuff interesting. I found real-world spacecraft interesting. I've done videos on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. I've talked about the space shuttle itself, but I should probably revisit it. But anyway, that's one nice thing about Ridley Scott. He did it with the Nostromo and the original Alien, and he continued it with the Prometheus. It's a real believable ship, at least as far as it goes. So on deck A, we have 3 hypersleep chambers, suspended animation. These are considered 3rd generation suspended animation, so quite evolved. In the Alien universe, the earliest cryo-freezing technology evolves in the 2030s, but it's very primitive. This technology is very advanced, and essentially it just slows the body. There is aging, but it's much slower, and the body is effectively put into shock and submerged in a bit of a dream state. The sleep chambers themselves are directly powered by the fusion reactor. However, if there's a failure, they do have lithium-ion backup batteries per chamber. Each chamber can be powered in theory up to 100 years, although no one would survive in hypersleep that long. The ship itself can support the crew up to 10 years in hypersleep and has enough resources for them to operate 6 months, while awake. The hypersleep decks, after they wake up, they have to go to an examination room to make sure they survived okay, they're not ill. That's, of course, still on the first deck. After that, there are storage lockers for clothing, also EVA suits. There's also an airlock, for needs. There's also the main access to the ship's onboard AI, not David, a different one, essentially a predecessor to Mother from Alien. So we have some other critical systems and things like that. So that's where the crew will be in hypersleep, and just some basic resources, equipment, storage lockers, yada yada yada. Deck B, though, has a lot going on. It's probably our most important deck for day-to-day life. First off, at the front of the B deck is the bridge. It has essentially 7 stations: the captain's chair, co-pilot, navigator. Those are the 3 critical stations. There's also communications, cartography, general science sensor station, and then we have a kind of life support systems engineering station. There's also a holographic table for displaying things. The Prometheus had very good sensors for its day and time, as well as an exploratory craft. The bridge itself had removable armor plating shields, again for interstellar flight. They could be retracted for view. It even have an observation blister, which is again much in keeping with actual real-world spacecraft. And behind it, we had a couple of things. There was the armory, which housed some personal weapons. The ship itself had no weapons, but for various reasons, there were some pistols, which in the real world were actually Walther GSPs. They also had some shotguns, which in the real world were Benelli M3s. I think we've done videos on, actually. And they had flamethrowers as well, something that Vickers here used. But across from that, you had more storage, more EVA equipment, and you had the ship's primary Class A escape pods on each side there. They were basically one-man little coffins that could be ejected. But then going back from there, you had the luxury suite that Vickers had, which was its own lifeboat in and of itself, considered a Class D. It had 7 rooms, its own nav systems. It could land on a planet or survive in space. However, it did not have enough engine to take off from a ground. So it could land, but it couldn't take off from a planet if it was already there. So it also wasn't FTL capable. But it had about 50 years of supplies to support the individual if in cryosleep for a good chunk of that time. It had air for quite a bit, but of course food and water would run out. It also had the rather famous Pauling 720i med pod from the quite interesting scene in the film. Also on the same deck, you had the crew's quarters. Each crew member did have their own quarters. They might have been a bit Spartan, but they did have some private space. The captain had slightly nicer digs. You have a mess hall, and you have a medical bay. And again, because this is a science ship, you have science labs 1 and 2. More storage lockers, equipment. You have the upper part of the reactor for access here. And towards the end of B deck, you have some more scientific equipment, observation, and so on and so forth. And those would be the two decks, really primarily B, that the crew would operate on. Because when we move down, C deck is mostly a cargo deck. Storage, supplies, that kind of thing. There were storage tanks. There was a cargo bay or two. There was a cargo management office. You had the primary reactor access, other kind of logistic things. We also had a gymnasium that also doubled as an auditorium / meeting room. It was one of the largest places on the ship. If it had not been for D deck, which had the garage, the vehicle bay, it was over 23 meters by nearly 15 meters. It could drop down. And it had 5 RT transport craft. It had 4 ATV NR6 craft. And then it had 2 larger mineral mining vehicles, plus other stuff. And it too had its own office. And it had multiple airlocks and EVA suits and supplies, that kind of thing. But it was more of a work area. So as we move down, it transitions more into work environment and what have you. And like I said, we have some kind of in-between decks, some maintenance decks, that kind of thing. So what else do we have? Well, let's put another figure on and talk about the suits and the equipment itself. And since they're the same body, we'll take this one off the stand. This is, of course, Dr. Elizabeth Shaw. Pretty standard, especially with the older NECAs. I think when they have a choice between better articulation and looking right, they kind of go with the looking right over the better articulation. Still not bad for what it is. She has a knife for various reasons. It didn't come with the figure, but yeah. And this is actually the kit that came with a different figure too. And we have this little camera that you can put on the side. And of course, the helmet comes off. This one can be a little tight because of hair. And I'm going to take it off. We're scraping the paint, but you get the idea. Helmet does come off. It is a bulbous helmet. And it's a very thin suit. And Ridley Scott said he wanted to do it to kind of look at newer NASA trends. Slim, more tactical, more maneuverable, vis-a-vis kind of bulky like we saw from the Nostromo. And it really does, look at some of the newer concepts of a tight hugging suit for keeping pressure on the body, that version of a compression suit. It is considered the advanced SE tactical and exploration suit. It's meant for good mobility, going out, doing things, moving around. The helmet itself is nano reinforced. It gives about 320 degrees, so pretty great visibility. And it has displays inside to give other viewpoints and data, all that kind of stuff. Relatively slim, small backpack. Pretty neat. In some ways you might say it's way too advanced compared to the Alien. And that's true, but that's the problem with any kind of prequel. It's going to be that way. You could also argue, if you really wanted to in universe, that this is a high-end, top-of-the-line science vessel, exploration vessel, whereas the Nostromo was an aging trucker in space, and those suits were more utilitarian. They had other suits on board the Prometheus besides this one, but this is one we see in the film. So take it for what you will. It's basically 2 layers. You have the under layer, what's cadmium. You can also have iridium skeleton on the outside, basically light tactical armor. If you're in a hostile environment, they weren't really thinking like fighting so much as just, bad environment. Of course, it has standard life support, monitoring systems, the usual. But yeah, in a lot of ways, Dr. Shaw and, of course, Drs. Holloway were the leaders, at least on the science end of the mission. They never did make a Holloway figure. In fact, Shaw and Vickers both just came out several years after the film as so-called Lost Wave. In fact, they never released a human in the Prometheus line, although, to be fair, the Prometheus line back in 2012-2013 only had 3 waves, and really Wave 3 was a bit of a cop-out. The closest we ever got to a human, well, it's David. So obviously Shaw and Vickers are the female mold or buck in the suit, and David is in the male. Of course, it was pointed out, why does he need a suit? Because he's an android, an artificial person. But he says he does it to have humans feel more comfortable. So there it is. And David 8, so-called 8th generation of synthetic, is very critical to the film. And of course, Michael Fassbender is one of the highlights of the film. And androids have always been a part of the Alien franchise. So, yeah, why not? He is the only one that stays awake during the voyage. So over 2 years, he spends time learning and doing whatever robots do. Some of it a little bit creepy, but yeah. The Alien universe is really back and forth on if the androids in it are really alive, self-aware, or just meant to be. And of course he ends up playing a major part in the film and is one of the few that are aware that Sir Wayland is on board and all that good fun stuff. He's of course a little bit of a bulkier figure compared to the women. He has the same camera as they do, but for whatever reason his actually has a cable attaching it. You can still move it to the top of his helmet though if you want. But more of a backpack, or almost like a butt pack. The little kind of carry case. He did come with this one. I've seen some call it a flashlight. I'm not sure. There's a flashlight built into the helmet. See if this one wants to come off. Yeah, that one comes out pretty easy. He actually comes with 2 heads. There's only one in the series that does. There's the version here where he's wearing kind of the cap, kind of a acknowledgement of the Snoopy cap that astronauts wear. Also a bit of an acknowledgement to the original Alien. And of course he has some of the armor kind of plating or coating on there. Just overall bulkier figure. It's a really neat figure though. Then again, I'm a sucker for spacesuits. They're just kind of neat to me. I actually wish we had some crew in the ship suit like the captain. But the line didn't really do well for NECA, so they only made these, and again they barely made Shaw and Vickers. But they did make David. He was actually part of the second wave. of course, wave 1 were the engineers, what we've already looked at in the previous video. What do you think? Well, let's wrap this up. Well, Vickers' helmet comes off easier, so there it is. She also comes with one of the flamethrowers. I wish someone had come with one of the shotguns. A 110 scale Benelli M3 would be kind of neat. Obviously, the mission definitely doesn't go to plan, especially for David here, who ends up like this at the end of the film. For those who don't know, this actually comes with Shaw, and it actually moves. The head moves on it, so we actually have a total of 3 Fastbender heads. This one and the 2 that came with the figure originally. I like to put this one in the hand of the engineer. It looks good in his hand. It's very fitting. I will admit, I like the film, but I like the more adventurous, space exploration. When it tries to turn into more of a horror film, I'm not saying it's bad. Certainly the scene within the 730 or 720 med pod is memorable. But yeah, I like more of the space exploration and the philosophizing part. That's just my speed. Probably explains why I like Interstellar. These figures are neat. I mean, they remind me kind of the Super 7 2001 figures I showed you. Same scale too, which is nice. And the Prometheus itself from Eaglemoss is neat. Interestingly, that we only got this ship from the movie, and we actually had 2 ships, the Lifter and the drop ship from Covenant. Not sure what else they could have done. They did do the Engineer Dreadnought, as we looked at in the previous, but that was mostly supposed to be from the original Alien, not the Prometheus film, but either one. Maybe one of the transports, the RT or the ATV. On the other hand, I do find it kind of funny that they never did the USCSS Covenant. Really wish they had done that one. But no, all in all, I like the film Prometheus. Then again, what I want, what I expect are different from what you do. I will say it had good music, good sound design. And I like the actors. I think people kind of forget how the characters were in the original Alien. They were, they've kind of gone down historic now, but they weren't super memorable in the beginning. Anywho, I have some friends that are geologists, and they actually remind me of Fifield. And we do have a Fifield, but he's actually going to be in the next episode. Because now that we've kind of set the stage, we've talked about the engineers, now we've talked about the Prometheus and its crew. Next time, we can talk about the black goo. And then after that, we can talk about the xenomorph. It all comes in as you see it, though. I don't know. They enjoy it. I enjoyed it. They enjoy these things. And I'm one of those people that wishes that Alien Covenant had kind of continued on, or rather the sequel had continued on with Prometheus instead of kind of veering more towards Alien, but that's just me. What do you think? Do you wish it had gone that way, or do you like that it veered back towards Alien? The one thing I'm not happy with is the whole, David creating the xenomorphs. Not keen on that. I also have to wonder, talking more to Covenant, how did an android who'd been ripped in half survive for that many years alone on an alien world without supplies. At least any supplies of note. I could understand a really advanced AI from another franchise. You know, Mr. Data from Star Trek, let's say. But David 8, I mean, he doesn't have any self-healing capabilities and all that, so... But that's criticism for a different film. But we will get to Covenant when we start talking about the xenomorphs or the protomorphs or neomorphs or praetomorphs or whatever the hell you want to call them. But next time, we get to revisit the engineer and their goo. Theirs is black, not white. So let me know what you think. Appreciate you hanging out, talking nerd stuff with me. If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.